Hello, everybody. It's Beagle3280. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of the Pound Pals podcast. So this episode is called The Great Breakfast Debate in Crash 4. The reason why it has two titles like that is because it's actually both topics I'll be talking about in the podcast, and I'll be trying to make every episode in that similar sort of vein. Okay, so let's start off everything with the Great Breakfast Debate. So it's no surprise that a lot of times people like to have debates about breakfast, whether it be the cereal before the milk or the milk before the cereal. There's even one even more common than that one, and that's the whole thing of, pancakes versus waffles. So I'm here to weigh in on my opinion on all of that, I should say. So when it comes to the whole thing of cereal, it's the bowl, then the cereal, then the milk, obviously. So the whole thing of pancakes versus, waffles. So waffles are very nice because they're kind of like pancakes, except they got pockets to hold the big, glob of butter, all our little syrup you could just pour all over those fucking things. And pancakes were just, flat pieces of fried dough. Or batter, I should say, not dough. They're nice and browns, and they're just covered in syrup, maybe a little dab of butter on top of those as well. Is just amazing. But in all honesty, if I'm to pit the two of them against each other, I'd say fuck them both, because I'd prefer, something like some eggs or even French toast for that matter. But even for that, to pick between the two of them, especially when it comes to the frozen product scene, Eggo makes some really good frozen waffles, especially the chocolate chip waffles. But there is a brand of frozen chocolate chip pancakes, which I'm going to have my editor throw in a picture of what those are, because I can't remember what they are off the top of my head, unfortunately. But when it comes to the frozen thing altogether in general, I honestly prefer frozen pancakes over frozen waffles. But when it comes to like home cooked things, I much, much prefer French toast. Or even, eggs. Then it comes to the whole thing, of cereal versus Pop-Tarts. In all honesty, if I have a choice, I'm going to take Pop-Tarts, especially if it's the Hot Fudge Sundae Pop-Tarts. The best fucking Pop-Tart in existence. When it comes to cereal, there's plenty of really great cereals, and honestly, I could go all day about talking about, my favorite ones, considering, it's my podcast, and this is a bit more of an opinionated episode right here. And I'm trying to stay away from controversial topics and, political things, as I don't like being political, as I know it pisses a lot of people off. And I try to stay away from controversy because I don't want to feel like I'm just making some kind of, thing for clout or, to be noticed because I'm throwing in my opinion on what's, a big fucking deal right now. I don't want anything like that. No kind of negativity surrounding this channel in any way, shape, or form. So, just take everything that you hear and see in this channel with just a little tiny bit of salt. Because, it's not really, meant to make you think one way or another, in all honesty. This is just me being opinionated, okay? For the most part. It's mostly my opinion. It's not meant for you to change your opinion to, think like me, because if we all thought the same, then everything would just be, kind of fucking boring, in all honesty. So yeah, don't try to take what I'm saying as fact, or make you think what I'm saying is fact, or I'm gonna, weigh in on some kind of thing to be able to gain in views, because that just ain't me. I just wanted to do the breakfast debate just because I, felt like it, and because I could. Alright, now let's talk about Crash 4. So a lot of people probably are going to say, I guess talk about Crash 4, that one Toys for Bob made. The really awesome one, It's About Time. Yeah. We're going to compare Crash 4, It's About Time, to the original Crash 4, which is Wrath of Cortex. Now, of course, this is me being, like I said, opinionated, due to the fact of how I remember my childhood. If I'm being entirely honest with you guys, I kind of liked Wrath of Cortex a little bit more than I did, It's About Time. The thing is that with Wrath of Cortex, it's kind of the game that I grew up with. I honestly, my first ever game console was the PlayStation 2. Like, the big, bulky motherfucker was my very first ever, game console. And the reason why I say it's my first ever one is because I think it's my first one I ever solely owned myself. Because my first ever technical console was my N64, which belonged to my mom previously. This one was bought for me, but of course everybody used it because, PlayStation 2 was one of the best consoles of all time. And I remember growing up and playing Crash Bandicoot on my cousin's PlayStation X, the original PlayStation. And I loved that game series, and eventually we found the game Wrath of Cortex, which, when I was growing up, I didn't really get on the internet a lot. And if I did get on the internet, I didn't look up much about any kind of, video game or anything like that, aside from maybe, some cheat codes to N64 games, because I was still living in, the Stone Age when the Nintendo Wii was at its most popular, if you even consider it to have been popular at any point. To which I would arguably say that was around the time of Smash Brawl, when Sonic was announced to finally, actually be in a game about in a Nintendo game, which is something I was wanting since when I was younger. Before the whole Mario and Sonic series, maybe Mario and Sonic series came first. The older the memory, the more fuzzier it gets. I'll just put it that way. So, yeah, my first ever console was the PlayStation 2, and we found this game, Crash: Wrath of Cortex, and I fucking loved it. Honestly, it was one of the first ever Crash games I ever owned, ever played. None of my friends owned it. None of my friends ever really played it. They just made me kind of, give me a bunch of bullshit. They didn't own Xbox 360 and all that. I think I might have talked about it before in my stream, which is the only one that's currently available on YouTube, is my stream from last Mother's Day, which I'm possibly having a stream on Saturday, because this is being recorded at 2 a.m. on Friday. The Friday this is getting uploaded at 11 o'clock at. So technically tomorrow, I'm going to try to see if I can get a stream going, but if I can't with my friends, I might just do a solo one either tomorrow or Sunday. But yeah, I mentioned in my stream about the whole thing where I didn't own any of the certain console. I wasn't going to get the girls to notice me and all that bullshit. And younger me, wanting to have a relationship, kind of fell for it. And I eventually, did get an Xbox 360. I did enjoy the Xbox 360, honestly. But the PlayStation 2 was the one I had the most and whatnot. But when it comes to that Crash 4 versus the new Crash 4 with Toys for Bob, I much prefer the Crash 4 that came out way back when, Wrath of Cortex. But it's only because of the fact that Wrath of Cortex had an amazing soundtrack. Now, I'm not going to be able to play any of this for you guys because YouTube and copywriting issues. I'm not sure if I can get in trouble with it at all, but I'm not going to even risk it. And I'm not going to make my editor risk that either. So, yeah, the whole thing with the soundtrack is just amazing. Crash 4's soundtrack, or I should say It's About Time's soundtrack, is good, but it's not as memorable as Wrath of Cortex. Wrath of Cortex is definitely one that I would probably, if given the ability to do so, I would definitely make an entire Spotify playlist and play this goddamn stuff on loop. But another thing that, I'm getting nervous and mixing stuff up again. But, the whole thing with It's About Time that has over Crash Wrath of Cortex was that It's About Time had an entire world based around a Japan-esque area, which is just fucking beautiful. And of course, when it comes to time travel, there's gotta be a world based around the old-timey Japan, which, if anyone doesn't know, is my favorite kind of thing when it comes to tropes about Japan and time traveling. Because old-timey Japan is just really beautiful and interesting to me. The whole thing with One Piece's Wano Kuni arc, with the cherry blossom trees, I believe they're cherry blossom trees. I could be extremely wrong, looking a complete fucking idiot here. Or the story of, with the katanas, because katanas are like my favorite, like, kind of sword of all, as like ever. Which even then, there was already katanas in the series before they even went to Wano Kuni, as seen with Ryuma having Shushui, and he was actually from Wano, but that's a whole different thing. But yeah, old-timey Japan also kind of reminded me a bit of Rurouni Kenshin and Inuyasha. I want to say it takes place in like old-timey Japan, because it is a Japanese thing, so I don't want to be stereotypical by saying that or come off as being racist, but it's what it feels like to me. Maybe I'm like completely wrong and just looking like a complete jackass again, but yeah, like old-timey Japan is one of my favorite like places, and even Japan in general is a place that has always intrigued me and I'd like to be able to check out sometime. Which, I know I'm getting off topic a lot, but that's kind of a typical Big 3280 video for you guys. Maybe I'll talk a bit more about Japan in a later podcast episode or something. But anyway, back to the whole thing. And the whole thing with Crash Wrath of Cortex, it only had one kind of world based around Japan in general, or Oriental area. Actually, no, there was two, because there was Tsunami and then there was Banzai, which both have amazing fucking soundtracks, by the way. But I think Banzai is more based around like Chinese. But I'm only saying that because I'm pretty sure China was more prominently known because of ninjas, because samurai and ronin came from Japan. If I'm remembering my history correctly, because when it comes to history in general, we learned about United States history, and I fucking slept through most of that because it was boring as all hell. Not to say that, America's history is boring, because I'm American myself. It's just, a lot of, it's already stuff I've already fucking heard before. It's just kind of boring to be being rehashed to us over and over. We learned a little bit of it when we were in elementary. We learned about it all in middle school, and they wanted us to relearn it all again in high school history. Like, bruh, we already know this content from all these years past. Why are you rehashing it to us yet again? But yeah, and then there's Tsunami, which I'm not even sure if that's supposed to be like a Japan-esque area or even like, China area. But essentially it's got a bit of like a feel to be kind of Oriental-esque. Maybe I'm just, mixing shit up again. But the whole thing is that the whole world with Crash 4, It's About Time, definitely takes the cake when it comes to being like a favorite area of mine. Especially with the costumes of I think it's Persona or Fursona. I think it's Persona, yeah. And the paper cut skin for Crash and Coco. Those are two of my favorite like character skins when it comes to those characters on It's About Time, because Wrath of Cortex didn't have any skins at all. But yeah, the whole thing with Wrath of Cortex, a lot of people just do not like, is for the fact it's pretty much just if you want to consider it a graphical update version of Crash 3. Which, if I'm being entirely honest with you guys, I never even played till the Crash Insane Trilogy came out. Because when I was growing up, like I said, I played Crash 2. And I had originally gotten Wrath of Cortex, and I played a shit ton of it. I never actually got to the later worlds, which I kind of am kicking my own myself about doing that. And it makes me kind of want to try to be able to find something to be able to play the games again, because I might be able to play it on my PlayStation 2. We'll just have to hook it up and figure it out. So then a few years passed by, and we go to this used game store, and at this used game store they had a bin or a box that they pulled out, which come with PlayStation 1 games, because all the original 3 Crash games, along with Crash Team Racing and Crash Bash, were on PS1. And inside this thing, I found Crash 2, and I found a thing for Bubsy 3D. And I was almost tempted to buy Bubsy, and all these years later, I thank myself I bought Crash 2 instead, because I eventually later on figured out what Bubsy 3D was like, and yeah. So I actually did manage to get a hold of Crash 2, and I actually did, get to see a lot of that throughout my childhood, like a lot of the game throughout my childhood. I've also got, I eventually did later on get Crash Team Racing, and I played the ever-living hell out of that game too, and even played all of Nitro Fueled. Because, Crash Team Racing is just amazing, and Crash Nitro Kart was also awesome. Speaking of, I might just actually do a podcast episode where I compare those two games, pit those two games against each other, Crash Team Racing and Crash Nitro Kart, as those two seem to be kind of a topic of a lot of hatred towards the other brand, because it's hatred towards one game because both games are too much of not being the same. Which, if you ask me honestly, you're going to want something different every single game, because you're going to want something a little bit different, I should say. Because if you just keep rehashing the same product, people are going to get sick of fucking buying it. But yeah, that was the Great Breakfast Debate and the Crash 4 Crash 4. I would have called it Crash 4 Versus, but I'm afraid that's probably already taken by somebody else, and I didn't want to seem like I was copying somebody. And there is no gameplay footage. It's just me kind of just talking about it and getting my opinion on it. But actually, now that I think about it, I hadn't actually given those games comparisons too much justice. So let me go back and give them a little bit more comparisons here. So for the fact that Crash 4 was able to reuse a lot of old bosses, the way that Wrath of Cortex did it was they did kind of do them dirty. As for the fact that they kind of just appeared as stage obstacles. Like Dingodile appearing in some of the stages just to shoot, some fireballs up in the air to come down on you. And Entropy just standing in one spot and zapping like a little laser to try to obliterate you. And Tiny just standing in your way, just keeping you from going where you need to go. It's kind of a major downgrade, especially if you were a person who's played Crash 3 before you played Wrath of Cortex. You would understand why that's kind of like a bullshit thing. Because like I said, I didn't play Crash 3 first. Wrath of Cortex came before Crash 3 for me. But the whole thing with It's About Time is it does it better because you actually get to see a lot of these old bosses and get reused again in much more different ways and a bit better. Granted, not every boss gets reused again, and at least they are a lot more different, a lot more, not stage obstacles like they were back in Crash Wrath of Cortex. I'm not gonna lie, I did like Toys for Bob's adaptation of Crash 4, but to say that it was better than Wrath of Cortex by any and all means is a bit much, because Wrath of Cortex had an amazing soundtrack, and for the fact that it offered the gameplay ability of the Atlas Spear, oh man, I can't remember what that stage is called, but it's the very first ever stage of the game that you actually get to use the Atlas Spear. I believe it's stage 3 or stage 4. Because stage 2 is Tornado Alley, stage 1 is Arctic Antics, and stage 5 was the laboratory level, which I can't remember what's called off the top of my head. I should have researched a lot of these levels. But, yeah, when you first played the Atlas Spear, it was stage 3. I had so much fun rolling around that ball and feeling the controller vibrate every time that you went over something. And then in the later levels, when you're doing it in the snow area, it's so much fun. And like I said before, the music that Wrath of Cortex offers fucking trumps It's About Time's soundtrack in every way, shape, and form. But to say that one game is better than the other one is like altogether, like we're talking like the whole fucking package deal here. To say one game is better than the other one just isn't gonna happen. I mean, if you're looking for graphics wise, because like I said, there's likely to be a lot of different fields. Because, well, I'll just say it like this here, just so it doesn't feel like it's like another big waste of almost another 10 minutes because I kept getting sidetracked and all this and that because my brain is all over the place. So when it comes to Crash Wrath of Cortex definitely takes the cake when it comes to the whole thing of music, and it takes the cake when it comes to the whole thing of level design aspects for the most part. And I'm only saying level design aspects because I'm talking about the different thing of like the Atlas Sphere and a couple other things that it does a little bit better. Like the worlds are like really nice, but not as nice as like the overworld worlds or worlds in general as compared to Crash It's About Time. So, and even then, it kind of takes the cake when it comes to music and to a couple other of its own aspects, like being able to find all the fucking boxes possibly in one run, and for the whole thing of having the power-ups that were in Crash 3, because Crash 4 doesn't really give you a lot of like power-ups like the Crash Dash anymore, which is, or I should say It's About Time doesn't give you the Crash Dash anymore, which is kind of a big fucking part of the Crash series because it's been in every single game past Crash 3 for the most, every mainline game past Crash 3. It was in Wrath of Cortex, it was in what's it called, The Huge Adventure, or XS if you live outside the US, and it was also in Entranced. But for whatever reason, it did not appear in It's About Time, and it didn't appear in Twinsanity, but Twinsanity was an open world game, so it has an excuse. And then when it comes to Crash 4, It's About Time, Crash 4 It's About Time definitely takes the cake when it comes to like graphics and when it comes to the ability of playable characters, because in Wrath of Cortex you had 2 characters, which were Crash and then like maybe 4 or 5, maybe like 5 levels in total you can play as Coco. But Crash 4 It's About Time offers about maybe 4 or 5 playable characters altogether, which is just really nice. But there are some aspects about Crash 4 that kind of suck, like the bonus levels that you have to do with a different character, and you have to play half the level with that character and then redo the second half with a different character, and it's just a little bit more difficult than what it was the first time through. Like that just seems like that is about like the Binding of Isaac Repentance with their tainted characters. It just kind of feels like filler, in all honesty. It doesn't really catch my intrigue that it's filler content, but a lot of people are gonna do it just because they're gonna want something to probably do, and even then it gives you more of an excuse to keep playing Crash 4 It's About Time, which is an awesome game. So I guess I do take that a little bit back. But one thing that Toys for Bob definitely does that I thought was kind of like meh was for the fact you have to get the Insanely Perfect relics, which you have to beat the entire level without dying at all and find and get all the gems in the same run. No, it's not very fun. And then there's the whole thing, like the flashback tape was also a very awesome addition. The flashback tape was those like bonus levels that you had to do that were like puzzle based, and you did get a skin if you got a gold in every single flashback level. But getting the flashback tape was a pain in the fucking ass because you had to get to the tape without dying at all and collect the tape before it would count towards anything. And some of those tapes get hidden in the very, very deep depths of levels. And getting that tape alongside getting your Insanely Perfect relic is kind of a bitch. But even then, you don't have to get both of them in the same run. It just makes things a lot easier if you're able to do so. But yeah, to say that Crash 4, It's About Time, is definitive just isn't going to happen. There's no way it's... To say it's definitive against Wrath of Cortex is, not possible. I can't say that and, feel right about saying it. It's not because of the nostalgia factor. It's just because the whole thing of, both games are great in their own aspects. They're not everybody's cup of tea, granted. But, Wrath of Cortex doesn't require you to have a time trial relic be done against developer times. Yeah, there's developer time trial relics in Toys for Bob's version of Crash 4. Which, granted, they're not required for a 106% completion file. But that just seems kind of, meh to me. It's even worse than the pointless filler of the inverted levels, which is just a level with a different filter put on top of it. Granted, it's, still gives you more of an excuse to keep playing the game. But even then, why were they even put in the first place? So I guess that's it for this episode. Sorry, I kind of went off track and started talking about all sorts of different things when I was talking about, one particular thing or whatever. I'm going to try to, stay more on topic when I come to these podcasts so I don't keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I'll see you guys possibly Monday for my next episode of my podcast. See you guys then.